You are watching E-Awaaz TV, Voice of Community.
हेलो एंड वेलकम टू अ वेरी स्पेशल सेगमेंट ऑफ इंटरव्यूज। आज हमारे साथ जो हैं साहब वो बहुत ही बड़े जर्नलिस्ट हैं और बहुत बड़े अदारे के साथ हैं काम कर रहे हैं इस वक्त। हम आपको जब बताएंगे तो यू विल बी रियली सरप्राइज्ड एंड इट इज एब्सोल्युटली आवर प्राउड प्रिविलेज कि हम उनके साथ कनेक्ट कर सके और हम उनके साथ बात कर रहे हैं। मेरे साथ हैं मुर्तजा हुसैन द इंटरसेप्ट से। इंटरसेप्ट का नाम सुनते ही आपको याद आता होगा कि बहुत जो बड़ी बड़ी स्टोरीज इन्होंने की हैं, जो खासतौर पे पाकिस्तान के अंदर इमरान खान से रिलेटेड कुछ स्टोरीज जो साइफर के केस से थी वो इन्होंने ब्रेक की थी, और इस तरह की और बहुत दुनिया में जो बड़ी स्टोरीज होती हैं द इंटरसेप्ट वो ब्रेक करता है। उन्हीं के एक जो सीनियर जर्नलिस्ट हैं मुर्तजा, उनके साथ हम बात कर रहे हैं। हेलो मुर्तजा एंड थैंक यू फॉर कनेक्टिंग विद अस। वी आर एक्सट्रीमली प्लीज दैट यू कुड फाइंड टाइम फॉर अस एंड यू आर टॉकिंग टू अस। आई मीन ऑफ कोर्स वी हैव सीन हाउ थिंग्स आर गोइंग ऑन इन साउथ ईस्ट एशियन रीजन, especially in India and Pakistan, and just now we have seen results have come in from Bangladesh elections where Sheikh Hasina has once again won for the 5th time with a huge majority. So, but there has been a huge crackdown against, the opposition. We see the same thing going on in Pakistan elections. There are on February 8th, and the crackdown against opposition is in full swing, if we may say that. So, what are your takes on the February 8th elections going on there in Pakistan?
Sure. So obviously the Pakistani military is very involved in shaping the landscape in anticipation of the upcoming Pakistani elections in February. Imran Khan and the PTI, currently polls show, remain very, very popular among the Pakistani electorate. However, due to Mr. Khan's standoff and conflict with the Pakistani military, it seems very, very likely that he'll be judicially precluded from participating in these elections. And we've also seen that former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has returned to the country, and it seems that just as Mr. Khan is being excluded in various ways, administratively and legally, Mr. Sharif is having more doors open for him, in the sense that the judiciary revoked his previous lifetime ban on political participation. For all intents and purposes, it seems as though he's being groomed to return to power, and to do so in a manner which is more conducive to the interests of the Pakistani military. So we saw a statement from the US recently expressing concerns that Pakistan's elections would not be fair and free, and that all parties who the electorate wants to participate will not be allowed to participate. And this, of course, is a reflection of Mr. Khan's exclusion. So I think while we are about a month away from elections, it's very, very clear how representative these elections really may be when they come to pass.
Okay, there was a resolution in Senate that said that we want to delay elections just about on Friday, this last Friday. And then there was a counter resolution in which a lot of others said that no, elections should be held within the, stipulated time. Already it is delayed, and it should have been held within the 90-day framework as the Constitution says. Do you see a delay in polls in general elections in Pakistan, because now there are a lot of voices that have become, first they were just simmering, now they are becoming louder. So do you see a delay perhaps coming in?
Well, as you mentioned, there's been even currently existing constitutional guidelines around timeframes for holding a vote in a you could say a typical or legally expected manner have already been exceeded. So at this point, it's very, very possible that you could see further delays, further disruptions in the electoral process, because currently Pakistan, of course, is ruled by what's known as the caretaker government. But that caretaker government should only really have a mandate to prepare the country for future elections. And yet we've seen in the time that's been in power, done quite a bit more than just that. And really, this has been a time for the military to consolidate itself and reconsolidate itself in this role in Pakistani political affairs, and likewise conduct this crackdown on the PTI and Mr. Khan's party, which continues to hold rallies, continues to try to garner support, but is many ways being precluded from doing so to the full extent of its ability by the military and its caretaker government. So it remains to be seen. We're only, like I said, about a month out, so further delays would be quite disruptive, but it's very possible that, even in the time frame we've seen, the delayed time frame we've seen, it could be pushed back even further before a vote is actually held.
Okay, Murtaza, I'm going to take you to your own story, your own outlet story, the Intercept story on Cypher. You said something very interesting in your first reply when I asked you the first question on Pakistan elections. And you said that in US there is a lot of concern and the US wants to see free and fair elections in Pakistan. Okay, so connecting your article that, not really your article, but Intercept's article that appeared on Cypher, which said that actually in US there is a link that can be seen that US actually wanted Khan removed from power, and you published the whole, that Cypher on Intercept. So this is now very contradictory. On one side, now the US government is saying that we are ready to work with Pakistan. Whichever party comes, we are ready to work with Pakistan, with that party there, and we want free and fair elections. At the same time, they somewhat or allegedly conspired to remove Imran Khan. So how does that go side by side?
Well, one thing you always have to keep in mind is that obviously the U.S. government and U.S. society is not a monolith. There are different views, even internally within a particular administration, and there could be very, very starkly divided views. And of course, Congress, House of Representatives, Senate, you have individuals representing different constituencies, which could view the same subject very, very differently. And there's obviously vigorous debate about that, which is not to say nothing about the Pentagon and its own separate Department of Defense and State Department and so forth. They have their own separate institutional views of various different subjects. Vis-a-vis Pakistan, one thing you'll also like to keep in mind is that of course, the U.S. government will never say anything other than the fact that they support a democratic process in any given country and that they will cooperate with whoever is elected in a particular country. Now, the Cypher document shows a specific State Department official, senior official, putting pressure on Pakistan to hold a no-confidence vote in 2022 and to remove Imran Khan in that vote. That pressure was deemed by the Pakistani side to have come from the White House directly, and it may well have. But the issue now is that, of course, some time has passed now. We're about a year and a half on from that period, and the situation is such that so much light and scrutiny has been shed upon this event and this situation in which Mr. Khan was removed, that certainly if the U.S. were to say anything other than that they support democratic, free and fair elections in Pakistan, it would cut against all the public rhetoric globally about democracy promotion and so forth. So I think that, you have a divide. You have many people in the U.S., increasing numbers of people in the U.S. Congress and so forth, who are speaking up about what they see as democratic suppression in Pakistan. And at the same time, you have others in the U.S. administration who have very long cooperative relations with what you can call Pakistan's deep state, for lack of a better word, the military intelligence complex that exists there, and the associated political parties, which often work in tandem with it. So, there's pressure from both sides. And I will say one thing I've observed is that in the United States, there's a very big, vocal, in many ways, some ways influential Pakistani diaspora economically and politically. And they certainly are putting pressure on their own elected representatives to speak up about what's happening in Pakistan, because Mr. Khan, at the end of the day, is a very popular political figure among people in Pakistan, but also, as much, if not more so, among the Pakistani diaspora. And you'll see more of that pressure manifest the longer that he's in jail and appears to be unjustly excluded from participation in Pakistani politics.
Okay, again, your answer has, given a very interesting, point for framing my next question. You have just talked about the deep state. Okay, if US believes in democracy in countries, specifically in Pakistan, for example, why it has to be so close to the perpetrators of deep state, if I may say, if I can use this term, why they think that the military is the answer in that country, while at the in the front they say that democracy should flourish in Pakistan?
Well, that's a very good question. And effectively, I think that if you look at history, the US always tended to prefer in this region of the world and even in the Middle East and so forth in Latin America, it tended to prefer to deal with dictatorships and military regimes for the simple reason that, if you're dealing with democracy, it's very complicated because it's the synthesis of many, many different people's views. You have to take the population's opinion into an account. They, shift their position based on electoral calculations and domestic politics and changes in configuration and so forth. So it makes dealing with them a bit more difficult from the U.S. perspective. If you're dealing with a military or with one man who's a dictator or something like that, a system which is more simple, you could say, in a brutal way, you can get more done from an American perspective. You can get more guarantees. There's only one address or one, recipient for messages to make deals with and to make agreements with and so forth. So, in that sense, it's more convenient to deal with what you can call a deep state, for instance. And from an institutional standpoint, the U.S. military and CIA have had very close relationships with the Pakistani military and the Pakistani ISI. There's personal relationships which go back some time there. It's not always been a good relationship. Obviously, during the war in Afghanistan, there was many serious and you could say intense conflicts and disputes. Likewise, with the apparent harboring or presence of Osama bin Laden in Pakistani territory, which was revealed during a U.S. military raid. Obviously, a low point in the relationship between the two countries. And yet, despite that, I think the U.S. in many ways prefers dealing with their military and intelligence counterparts in Pakistan, as opposed with the Pakistani public, whose views would be much, much more difficult to accommodate, just for the fact that it's a very big country, very usually raucous press and civil society. It's more complex. And I think that unfortunately, while in public, the U.S. always promotes democracy in its rhetoric and so forth, in practice, its actual conduct seems to show in many places in the world a preference for authoritarian forms of government.
Okay, all right. Okay, Murtaza, do you see some change coming up in after the elections in Pakistan? For example, this lethal combination that has devastated Pakistan till now. Well, Mr. Nawaz Sharif, he perhaps did a few things. He has something on his CV to show. But Mr. Zardari, we don't see anything on his CV that he can show except for the drone attacks on Pakistan that he allowed. And then Maulana Fazlur Rahman, who forces himself to be a leader, well, but he's there. So do you see any change coming? Do you see PTI winning once again? Or in the presence of the deep state, it's going to be very, very difficult?
It's difficult to say. Obviously, it's still a month to go before the election, and a lot can happen in Pakistan in that time, or if the elections are delayed. What I would say is that it seems it'd be very difficult for Imran Khan's party to win in the election, given the level of suppression that's taking place against the PTI, not least the imprisonment of Mr. Khan himself. Crackdowns on various PTI leaders, intimidation, arrests, supporters who've been detained, in some cases tortured or even killed. It's a very, very difficult climate for any political party anywhere in the world to operate in. So notwithstanding their continued popularity, which is evidenced in polls and ongoing rallies that have taken place, I think that it's almost it would be very, very unlikely circumstance in which the PTI could prevail in any election. On the other hand, you have, as you mentioned, Nawaz Sharif, Asif Ali Zardari, other Pakistani politicians were contesting. I think that if I were to make a prediction, and with the caveats that I don't know what's going to happen, I think that all the momentum seems to belong to Mr. Sharif at the moment in terms of who seems most likely to have the favor of the military establishment and be able to return to power. And like you said, unlike Mr. Zardari, Mr. Sharif does have some track record of organic achievements which people can point to and may engender some popularity with him. I do think that one significant reason why the military may favor him at this moment is that they may be seeking a detente with India. And Mr. Sharif is one Pakistani politician whom we know that the Indian government and even particularly the current Indian government, the BJP government, has relatively good ties, at least relative compared to other Pakistani leaders. And they may be more willing to discuss economic, diplomatic, and political relations with a Sharif PMLN government than they would with Mr. Khan or Mr. Zardari. So that's one interesting consideration that I believe may become pertinent as the elections near.
Because he himself also has been, and his daughter has been, also speaking against the military, for which Imran is being pulled up now. So this is very interesting. Okay, coming to our neighbors, India. In India also elections are coming up, and the recent by-elections that took place, in that, once again, BJP came as, one of the biggest winners. And even now, in the general elections, the general sense is that BJP might win once again. Modi ji might win once again, and so there is you might have heard that there is a alliance of all the parties which is called India Alliance, where all the parties in India, they have gathered under one umbrella to defeat BJP. How powerful that alliance is, that India Alliance is, and what are Congress's chances of reviving itself once again, or for that matter, the India Alliance coming up and defeating BJP?
The prospects of the opposition in India at present do not seem very promising. Mr. Modi appears to still be very popular among Indians. He's delivered, at the very least, a convincing narrative to many people of economic ascendance. And likewise, he's used cultural polarization as an effective tool of consolidating his base of support. You could say more specifically, he's embraced an ideology of putting Hinduism and Hindus at the forefront of Indian identity, in exclusion of the more traditional, since independence, Congress view of Indian identity as being more multifaceted. And this, in a country where you're appealing to majoritarian sentiments, obviously that can also be good for winning the votes of the majority at elections. So I think these two planks of his appeal, being seen as a developer or an economic entrepreneur for his country, and likewise being seen as a guardian of majoritarian rights of the Hindu majority, those together are quite a formidable combination in any election. Likewise, if you look at the India opposition alliance to Mr. Modi and the BJP, it kind of, by its own definition, it's based on negation. It's based on rejection of the BJP. It's an alliance of people who are discontented with the current regime in the country, as opposed to having a shared or coherent agenda or goal that they're working towards that's an alternative. So I think when you have a situation like that, it's very, very difficult for the opposition, because they're really trying to bank on people being dissatisfied enough with the current regime that they'll vote for whichever party is most forthright in rejecting it. And yet, it does not seem to me that Mr. Modi is so unpopular that people are willing to take just any party which is an alternative. it seems very, very likely, almost assured, I would say, that he will win the upcoming elections. What happens in the years beyond that is difficult to say. The Congress's prospects are very weak at the moment, but what we've seen in India in the past is that parties which are very out of favor can return back to favor in future years, and that no one is really finished, so to speak, in politics in the long term. So while their position is bleak today, we'd have to reassess in a few years and look at the economic and political situation in India, which could still change in a way which could be beneficial to parties which seek to contest what looks to be otherwise at the moment as Mr. Modi's almost unassailable position at the heights of Indian politics.
Murtaza, this is very, very interesting what you have, tried to bring to the fore. Minorities are not happy, especially Muslims and Christians. They say that, they are being really pushed towards the wall. A lot of unemployment issues are there. Then the states which are not ruled by BJP, they have complained that they are not really getting all the funds to do the developments there. There is a constant rift between BJP and the capital, which is held by Aam Aadmi Party, Arvind Kejriwal. There is a constantly fight between the main central state, which is Indian capital, New Delhi, and the center. There are other states like West Bengal and all. They have been, very vocal that Modi ji is, not really giving them whatever they want, and they are delaying their even appointments and funds and everything with so much of discontent. And then you might have been following up Manipur. All that, since May, all that violence that is going on there. Then there are problems on the border with China. Don't you think one of these issues can be played against him? Also, then there is also a lot of, talk about his close friends like the Adanis and Ambanis, that Mr. Modi allegedly is, favoring them. So nothing can play out against him. He has become that powerful. You think?
Well, everything you said is true in the sense that there are all these divisions and fault lines in Indian society. I think it's kind of always been thus. India is a very, very big country. It's 1.2 billion people. And obviously, at any given time in some region of the world, not everyone's going to be on the same page. There are going to be fierce divisions. And we've seen this for many, many decades in India. Probably even more so than today, and if you go back a few decades, there were significant insurgencies raging all across northern India and even the Naxalite regions and so forth, not to mention assassinations of Indian leaders over the foreign policy missteps and so forth. So I think that when you look at it in context, even when we have all that instability, Indians may say, well, maybe it's still less instability than we had in the past. But much, much more importantly, is there a countervailing positive narrative that the regime or the government can point to in any given case? And I think in the case of India, and now, at least for compellingly or convincingly enough to many Indians, and people have disputes about this, and they dispute the figures and dispute how well it's spread around, but a number of them can say, well, okay, we're experiencing economic growth and we have significantly improved infrastructure, which is a very psychologically beneficial thing for any country to see new airports and roads and, other signals of increasing public prosperity. That is happening in a lot of India, and it means something to a lot of Indians who can then be appealed to by Modi and the BJP, who say, well, I'm making your country rich. I'm making your country powerful. So maybe you don't agree with everything I do. Maybe we have linguistic or ideological divisions, but everyone in the world likes to see economic prosperity. And it's no different from the United States. Bill Clinton had a very famous, I believe it was either Bill Clinton or George H.W. Bush, one 90s era U.S. president said, it's the economy, stupid. That's what the quote was, in the sense that if you want people's support, you should make the economy perform well. And if you can't even make it perform well, at least make them believe it's performing well, make them confident about their future and so forth. And I think that that narrative is very entrenched in India, and it has purchase to a lot of people. And as long as that's the case, then I don't think they will be that concerned about how minorities are feeling or how someone in a particular region of the country may not be doing as well. That's the most important thing. And I think it's what something Pakistan lacks as well, too, because, in some ways, Pakistan is more stable than it's been in the past. In some ways, it's been less stable. But the thing that's the most difficult for people, makes them most unsatisfied with the current regime, is the fact that the economy is struggling and they don't seem to have a confident narrative economically for the future. And that's the thing that I think sets apart India at the moment. It does have that narrative it can point to. And as long as that's the case, it's very good for Mr. Modi.
Thank you very much, Murtaza, for all your time. We are going to connect with you more as the Pakistan elections, get nearer, and then during the times of Indian elections. But that's all the time that we have today. It's been absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for connecting with us. But bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are watching E-Awaz TV, Voice of Community.